So dear students, welcome to my YouTube channel PCM Academy and myself Kosit Mondik. In the last class I have discussed about centripetal force and some example based on dynamics of circular motion. Okay, but in this class I will discuss about centrifugal force. Okay, and this is one kind of pseudo force. I have discussed about pseudo force in the chapter Newton's law for linearly accelerated frame. Now let me again discuss a different kind of pseudo force, and that is here centrifugal force. Okay, so let me understand first what is actually pseudo force. I have discussed about pseudo force in Newton's law, but again I am giving you the concept again in a brief, that what is actually meant by pseudo force. Then I will give you the concept of centrifugal force also, and centrifugal force is nothing but a special type of pseudo force, you can say. So what is pseudo force? When this pseudo force will appear, pseudo force will only be appeared on non-inertial frame. So we have two kind of frame of reference. We have discussed this thing earlier, that we have two kind of frame of reference. Okay, so one kind is nothing but the inertial frame of reference. I have discussed this thing earlier. Okay, inertial, and another thing is non-inertial. But we have seen that this non-inertial frame are of two types. Okay, so non-inertial frame means actually basically this is the accelerated frame, and here the acceleration is 0. Here the acceleration is 0. So here v is equal to constant, as well as sometimes v is equal to 0 also. So when the frame is itself is at rest, or the frame is in motion with constant velocity, then this is called as inertial frame. But in non-inertial frame there is acceleration always, there is v not equal to constant. But this acceleration may be arise in two forms. One is when the motion is linearly, so that there is a linearly accelerated motion, and one thing is rotating. Okay, when the particle is rotating or the frame of reference is rotating, then there will also be arised acceleration. Okay, so non-inertial frame are of two types, you can say. One is linearly accelerated, okay, and another is rotating. So we have discussed about this linearly accelerated frame, and I have given an example of lift. Okay, so the motion of lift, I have discussed about the motion of lift. So if there is a lift like this, suppose this is a lift and an object of mass m is here, and if the lift is moving suppose upwards, then what will happen if we consider the motion of the lift for the reference frame of lift itself. So if we draw the freeway diagram of m from inside the lift, so lift is here is a linearly accelerated frame, so this is non-inertial frame. Lift is itself non-inertial frame. Okay, so if this lift is non-inertial frame, then what will happen? I have discussed that in great detail. I have given proof also for this pseudo force. Okay, so what will happen here? You can see the lectures on Newton's law. So what will happen here? When the particle will moving with the lift, okay, so here the particle is in accelerated frame, that means it is in non-inertial frame. So when the lift is moving upwards, so there will be two forces in general. One is mg, okay, and another is normal direction n. But due to the accelerated motion, what will happen for the non-inertial frame? When we talk about the forces acting on the particle with respect to lift, so if you draw that force diagram on being on the lift, so if the observer is here, okay, if the observer is on the lift, then he have to assume one extra force, and that force is obviously mass of the object and the acceleration of the lift, and that will act always opposite to the acceleration of the frame. So here the acceleration of the frame is upward direction, so the pseudo force ma will act downward, along downward direction. So this is nothing but the pseudo force, and we can call it as a P. Okay, pseudo force. And when this pseudo force will arise in rotating frame, then this is called centrifugal force. Okay, so now let me understand what will happen if the frame is rotating. Here the frame is accelerated, but it's linear accelerated, maybe upwards, maybe downwards. Okay, when it will be downward, when there will be downward acceleration, I have discussed this thing also. When the lift is in downward motion, then what will happen? Mg force will be acting along this direction, and normal direction will be acting in upward direction. But as the lift in downward motion, that is non-inertial frame is in downward motion, so the pseudo force will act along upward direction. So it will always act opposite to the direction of the acceleration of the non-inertial frame. So now what will happen if the frame is rotating? Okay, So let me assume that suppose this is a rotating path and a platform like this platform is rotating sorry, a platform is rotating along this path. Okay, so you can imagine as a merry-go-round. Okay, so it is rotating along this path and this is a part of circular. Now if there is a object of mass m, okay, if a boy is sitting on the merry-go-round and the merry-go-round is, suppose the merry-go-round is rotating along a horizontal circle, so what will happen, the acceleration of this frame is rotating along the circular path, and we have discussed in the last class that when there will be circular path, what we have discussed in the last class, you know about centripetal acceleration as well as centripetal force. And centripetal force is a real force and this is due to the centripetal acceleration. So if any particle is rotating along this path, then there will be acceleration along this direction, and that will call actually radial acceleration or the centripetal acceleration, that is v square by r, and that is obviously is equal to omega square r. So obviously when this platform is moving, the one compartment of the merry-go-round, you can say this compartment of the merry-go-round is moving along the circular path, along the horizontal path, then what will happen, acceleration will be there along the center. Okay, and this is nothing but AC. Now according to the concept of pseudo force, this is now the rotating frame, so this is accelerated frame, the acceleration is along the center. So what will happen, a extra force will act on this particle along this direction. Why? Because always the pseudo force will act in the direction opposite to the direction of the frame of reference. Here the direction of the frame is along inward direction, so the pseudo force will act along outward direction. Okay, now here AC, we know this is v square by r or this is omega square r, so Ft will be nothing but m v square by r or is equal to m omega square r. So the magnitude of, and this is called the centrifugal force, actually this is the centrifugal force, but the magnitude of centrifugal force is exactly equal to the magnitude of centripetal force, but these two things are completely different, because centrifugal force is only arise in the frame of reference, in the non-inertial frame of reference, and centripetal force is arise in inertial frame of reference. So when you talk about inertial frame of reference, then there is no issue of centrifugal force. Okay, so please keep in mind this thing. So when we will use this, we will apply this concept of centrifugal force and centripetal force. I will apply this concept from the next class, and I have discussed in the chapter Newton's law also that I have solved so many problems by using two methods. One is from the inertial frame of reference and another is from non-inertial frame of reference. But when I have used the inertial frame of reference, then I have used only the real force, and when I have used the non-inertial frame of reference, then I have used pseudo force. For the lift problem, I have solved the lift problem in two different ways. One is with respect to the inertial frame of reference, when there is no story about, there is no talk about the pseudo force, but when I have discussed about non-inertial frame, the same problem when I have solved with respect to non-inertial frame, then I have involved their pseudo force. You have to involve pseudo force in that case. Okay, so please keep in mind when you use the pseudo force or when you write pseudo force in any problem. So the pseudo force can only be involved if you analyze the whole situation, the whole problem in the non-inertial frame of reference. Okay, but in accelerated motion we have seen many problems, but now this is the time to see the same concept in circular motion or in rotating frame also. Okay, so we will use the concept of centrifugal force and as well as centripetal force to understand the very basic some basic physical phenomena that are the bending of cycles, bending of car, etc. we will see from the next class. Okay, thank you.